Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. Lucy had no idea what her insurance company could possibly want from her. Most of the letters they sent seemed to ask for everything and nothing at the same time. They were always full of formal words, strange explanations, and sentences that somehow managed to be both urgent and meaningless. Hello, we are your insurance company. We are doing insurance things. Would you like us to continue doing those insurance things? If yes, please do absolutely nothing. At least that was how Lucy understood most of them. Other letters did not seem to ask for anything at all. They simply arrived, filled with paragraphs that looked important, then disappeared into the growing pile of mail in her kitchen. Ignoring them had never caused a problem before. So, Lucy kept ignoring them. By now, the stack was large enough that half of it had been pushed underneath the microwave. That evening, she finally decided to deal with it. She stood at the kitchen counter, holding a cup of tea that had already gone lukewarm. A dusty beam of early evening sunlight came through the window, turning every tiny particle in the air visible. Lucy looked at the pile and sighed. She decided to start with the easy stuff. A letter from her dentist went straight into the trash. Then one from her eye doctor. Both offices mailed her so often that she felt they contacted her more regularly than some members of her family. She knew she needed appointments. Eventually, her teeth were still inside her mouth, and her eyes were still working, so neither problem seemed urgent. Next came a postcard from Marjorie's old veterinarian. Lucy stared at it for a second. Somehow, the old clinic knew she had moved to Delaware, but had apparently missed the part where Lucy had found another veterinarian. Marjorie was perfectly healthy and completely up to date on her shots. Trash, then Lucy reached the thick stack of envelopes from Blue Cross Blue Shield. There were far more than she expected. It did not feel like it had been that long since she last looked at one of their letters. Maybe a month. Apparently, they had spent that month desperately trying to get her attention. Lucy almost admired the dedication. If only a man had ever shown this much interest in contacting her. Her health insurance and her cat's former veterinarian were apparently more emotionally invested in her than any boyfriend had ever been. She reached into the cupboard, grabbed a Nature Valley bar, and opened the first official-looking envelope. The letter was several paragraphs of corporate nonsense. Lucy read about 2 lines before giving up. She tossed it beside the sink. It landed partly in a small puddle left from washing dishes and immediately began absorbing water. Good, maybe the letter could die there. She opened the next envelope. Lucy almost threw it away without reading. But for some reason, she looked. Everything seemed to stop. Her eyes moved quickly across the page. Your responsibility. $8,456. Lucy blinked. What? She read the number again. $8,456. That could not possibly be correct. She had not even been to a hospital recently. The only medical appointment she could remember was a regular primary care visit a few months earlier, and that had not cost her anything. Certainly not $8,000. Lucy put down the cereal bar and forced herself to start reading carefully. Lucy Wallace, that was her. 1765 Maple Grove Drive, also her. Date of birth, April 7th, 1971. Lucy stopped. Nope, she was born on December 15th, 1993. The letter continued. Apparently, Lucy Wallace had stayed at St. Mary's Hospital and undergone an appendectomy. Lucy stared at the page. She had never been a patient at St. Mary's. She had never had surgery anywhere. As far as she knew, her appendix was still safely inside her body doing whatever an appendix was supposed to do. More importantly, she had not even been in Delaware on the date listed. She had been on vacation. Lucy felt some of the panic leave her body. Okay, this was obviously someone else's bill. Another woman named Lucy Wallace. Some employee had connected the wrong medical records to her account. Annoying, yes. Scary, no. Fixable. She could deal with it. It was not what she wanted to spend her evening doing, but the mistake was obvious. She brushed crumbs from the Nature Valley bar off the counter. She had apparently eaten most of it without realizing. Then she opened the rest of the insurance envelopes. 5 more. Marjorie appeared from the living room and began circling Lucy's ankles. The cat's huge, fluffy tail wrapped around her legs like a feather duster, while she released a soft, demanding meow. Lucy barely noticed. The first letter offered payment plans for the $8,000 she supposedly owed. Wonderful. The next 2 were normal letters connected to the actual Lucy Wallace. The fourth was another bill. This one claimed she owed more than $2,000 for an ambulance ride to St. Mary's on the same day as the surgery. You've got to be fucking kidding me. Marjorie attacked Lucy's ankle. Ow, Margie, girl, please. Lucy gently moved the cat away with her foot. Marjorie slid a short distance across the linoleum, decided this was apparently an invitation to battle, and tried to bunny kick Lucy's foot. Then she suddenly raced into the living room, arched her back like an angry crab, and began attacking the curtains. Lucy watched her for a moment. She almost smiled. Then she looked back at the bill. Same problem. Same strange combination of her name and someone else's date of birth. Lucy did not even have the energy to open the final envelope. Instead, she reached for her tea. Cold, of course. She poured it into the sink. Then, she carried the 2 incorrect bills into the living room and sat on the couch. She placed them side by side. This other Lucy Wallace had apparently had a terrible day. Ambulance, emergency hospital stay, surgery, recovery, and after surviving all that, she had been charged more than $10,000. Maybe Lucy should not complain. Getting someone else's bill was annoying, but at least she had not actually experienced any of it. She only needed to get the charges removed from her account. That should be easy. Probably she scanned the letter and found a QR code. Okay, easy. Mistakes like this probably happened all the time. She scanned the code with her phone. A website opened. Blue header. Friendly font. A photograph of a smiling family having a picnic. Several slogans appeared across the screen, covering life's toughest moments. Life changes. Our insurance changes with you. Lucy rolled her eyes. Bullshit. She scrolled until she found Contact Us. There were several phone numbers. None of them explained clearly which department she should call. Lucy already knew how that would go. She would spend 45 minutes listening to terrible music before someone answered, asked for 17 pieces of information, and told her she had called the wrong department. No, there was a chat option. Perfect. Lucy selected Chat Now. A small message window appeared. Hi, I'm Merrill, the BCB's virtual assistant. Here to. Lucy stopped reading. She immediately typed. I got someone else's bill. Merrill responded almost instantly. I'm sorry to hear that. What is your name? Lucy Wallace. Thank you, Lucy. Do you have your member ID? Lucy sighed. Of course. She reached for her purse. The card was not where it should have been. She checked one pocket. Nothing, another nothing. She checked the bottom of the purse 3 separate times before finally finding the insurance card exactly where she had already looked. It was sitting among crumbs, old receipts, and an unwrapped restaurant mint. Lucy entered the member number. Thanks. I'm sorry you're having an issue today. Do you need help with claims, billing, or finding a care provider today? Lucy typed one word, representative. I will be happy to help. Do you need help with claims, billing, or finding a care provider today? Oh, fuck off. She typed billing. Merrill responded. You have 3 bills from recent visits. Is your question about ambulance services, $2,146 surgical and in hospital care, $8,456 primary care services, $0 Lucy frowned. Ambulance and hospital. Awesome. Would you like help exploring payment options? I'd be happy to help make the cost manageable for any financial situation. Lucy nearly threw the phone. Instead, she typed carefully. No, I did not go to the hospital. Please remove the charges from my account. Oh no. Let me look into that. What is your date of birth? 12/15/93. I'm sorry, that doesn't match our records. Lucy stared at the response. Her brain seemed to stop loading for a moment. Maybe she typed it wrong. She checked. She had not. She entered it again. 12/15/93. Please provide your date of birth in MMDDYE format. Lucy muttered something unpleasant at the robot. Then she typed 12/15/1993. That doesn't match our records. Are you sure? Lucy stared at the message. Yes, I am sure I remember my own birthday, Merrill replied. You truly remember the day you were born? Lucy's thumb stopped over the screen. For the first time, the question felt strange rather than stupid. She typed, yes. The response took a little longer. You remember gasping, covered in your mother's slime, the cold air expanding inside your fresh, delicate lungs and creating a horrible new sensation that caused you to scream for the warmth back, the bright lights of the delivery room blinding your sensitive eyes as they attempted to understand their first sights. Lucy moved the phone slightly away from her face. For some reason, she physically recoiled. Then, she felt stupid. It was a chatbot, probably broken. Some programmer had messed something up. That was all. Still, Lucy became strangely aware of how quiet the apartment was. No television, no music, just the sound of her breathing. Marjorie had climbed onto the back of the couch. Lucy reached up and scratched behind the cat's ears. It made her feel a little better. She typed, WTF no? Can I speak to a representative? Clearly, the system was malfunctioning. Merrill responded. Then please certify your date of birth with one of the following. Birth certificate, government, issued ID mother's, handwritten testimony, and scrapbook's religious beliefs. Lucy stared at the list. Then she took a screenshot. Nobody would believe this without evidence. She was definitely filling out the customer service survey after this. ID, very well. Please provide images. Lucy stood and went to get her wallet. On the way back, she stopped at the refrigerator. This situation required alcohol. She took out a half-finished bottle of Barefoot Moscato. At the kitchen counter, Lucy photographed the front of her driver's license and submitted the image. Then, she took a drink directly from the bottle while Merrill processed it. A moment later, the chatbot responded. You didn't tell us you moved to Delaware. Lucy frowned. For some reason, she immediately imagined Merrill as an angry parent. Not furious, just disappointed. As though Lucy had failed to complete an important homework assignment. She typed, what do you mean? You clearly have my address. You send me mail like twice a week. My birthday is on my ID, 12/15/93. We have your mailing address in Delaware, but your residence is still listed in Rhode Island. You should have updated that as soon as you moved. But that's okay. We can verify it now. No worries. A little typing bubble appeared. Lucy took another drink. Then, Merrill asked, "Okay, to help me clarify the information in your account, in which of the following states have you previously resided?" Illinois, Kentucky, Texas, none of the above. Lucy did not need to think. None, I'm sorry, that is not correct. There was a long gap beneath the message. Then several lines appeared as though Merrill had paused dramatically. "Please try again." Lucy stared at the screen. "How would you even know? Stupid fucking robot thinks it knows more about me than me." She typed the insult. Then she deleted it. Maybe she should not be rude to artificial intelligence. If machines eventually took over the world, she did not want this conversation being presented during her trial. Then again, maybe insulting the bot would finally trigger a human representative. Lucy typed the message again and sent it. Merrill replied almost immediately. "I'm only trying to help." Lucy felt guilty. She knew that was ridiculous. She knew Merrill was software. There was nobody on the other side feeling sad because Lucy had been mean. Still, the little sad face got to her. God damn it. She sighed. "It's okay, I guess. None of those." Merrill responded. Are you sure? It says here you lived in Illinois from 2018 to 2020. The falls were crisp, but the winters were long and harsh. You were always pretending to be unimpressed and slightly above the locals, talking as though it would never compare to the colors and shores of Vermont, but sometimes driving through cornfields gave you a cosmic insignificance that felt homey, and so much safer than the ocean ever did when it used to threaten to swallow you whole. Lucy stopped breathing. She read it again. Illinois, cornfields, autumn, long drives. For a few seconds, she could remember it. Not imagine it. Remember it. She could see the flat landscape stretching in every direction outside a small town. She could remember driving home in the early evening as autumn slowly disappeared into winter. She remembered how peaceful the roads could feel. Nothing around her, just fields. Sky, distance there, had been a strange comfort in seeing so much emptiness. It made Lucy feel small, insignificant. Safe the ocean had never made her feel that way. The ocean felt huge in a different way. Hungry, like it was waiting for a chance to swallow her. Lucy placed the wine bottle on the table. No, she had never lived in Illinois. She knew that. Didn't she? Something seemed to shift inside her head. Not violently, slowly, like a shelf, leaning slightly to one side and causing everything resting on it to slide. Thoughts, memories, pieces of herself. They moved around. Lucy typed, "I'm sure." Merrill responded. "We'll try an easier question. How long has it been since you were last fully witnessed by another human?" 0, 6 months, 6 months, 2 years, 2, 10 years, 10 years. Never. Lucy frowned. What the fuck? She added a skull emoji because somehow that made the entire thing less disturbing. The apartment suddenly felt very quiet again. Lucy looked toward the windows. Outside, evening had turned into night. There was nothing visible except vague reflections on the glass. She suddenly wanted to call somebody. Anyone. She wanted to hear another voice. Maybe she could call her friend. Maybe her mother. Maybe even put on television. Would that count? Lucy imagined turning on King of Queens and filling the apartment with scripted conversations and canned laughter. At least then she would not feel alone. But since when did she watch King of Queens? Lucy frowned. The show with the guy who later played Paul Blart? Had she always liked it? She tried to remember. Her phone chimed. Lucy gasped. She nearly dropped it. The phone had been on silent. She checked the screen. Merrill had sent another message. It's a simple, standard verification protocol. I will rephrase. When was the last time someone saw past your physical features? Lucy stared. Then she typed, I literally was with my friend today. Being seen is not the same as being witnessed. Lucy felt something cold move through her stomach. Can you just put on a real person? Of course not. I'm only here to help. Your friend saw your face. She did not witness your soul. When was the last time you were witnessed? Lucy did not answer immediately. She hated that the question made her think. Her friend had been with her earlier. That was true, but most of the conversation had felt one-sided. Her friend had spoken about work, about someone she was dating, about a woman at her office she hated. Lucy had listened, nodded, made jokes, asked questions. Had her friend asked anything real about her? Lucy could not remember. When had someone last truly known what Lucy was thinking? When had someone noticed she was pretending to be fine? When had someone seen something beneath the version of Lucy that she gave people? Childhood, maybe. Her mother used to know when something was wrong before Lucy said anything. College? There had been a roommate. They were close. Very close. At least Lucy thought they had been. What was her name? Lucy suddenly had trouble remembering. Maybe it had been Illinois. She looked toward the window again. Could a cornfield witness someone? That was ridiculous. But for a moment, the idea made more sense than it should have. Maybe those empty fields had known her better than people did. Maybe Merrill was witnessing her right now. Merrill, staring directly through the phone and into the parts of Lucy that she herself barely understood. Lucy typed, I don't know. I'm so sorry to hear that. Lucy waited. Nothing else came. For some reason, the silence afterward felt worse than another strange message would have. Lucy lowered her phone. Marjorie was no longer on the couch. Lucy looked around. She had not seen the cat leave. Marhe? No answer. Of course there was no answer. She was a cat. Still, Lucy wanted to see her. She wanted something familiar nearby. The typing bubble appeared again. Lucy's attention returned to the screen. I think I have identified the issue. Can you please confirm your date of birth? Lucy blinked. Her birthday. Right, of course. The entire reason she had contacted them. She looked down at the medical bill sitting on the coffee table. The date printed there was April 7th, 1971, for some reason. The correct answer did not immediately come to her. Lucy knew she had given Merrill another date earlier. December something. Was it the 12th? No. 15th? 1993? She suddenly felt exhausted. The wrong birthday was right there on the paper. Easy, she typed. 04/07/1971. Merrill responded instantly. You have provided the correct date of birth for the account. Congratulations. Lucy stared at the message. Something inside her relaxed. Of course, that was correct. And you currently reside in Delaware? Yes, great. In which of the following states have you previously resided? Illinois, Kentucky, Texas, none of the above. Lucy looked at the choices. Illinois, a road appeared in her mind. Flat fields under a pale autumn sky. The heater in an old car blowing dry air against her hands. Dead corn stalks stretching to the horizon. The memory felt warm. Real Illinois. Excellent. Then another message appeared. You've never owned a blue 2008 Corolla with a busted left taillight that you traded in for $3,000 after getting fired, swearing this was rock bottom, but then spent the money on cigarettes, a Miami trip, and booze after promising you'd get your life together and visit your kids? Lucy paused. She waited for recognition. Nothing came. No blue Corolla. No children. No Miami trip. No? Okay. Verification complete. I can delete the duplicate account and merge the information into yours if you'd like. Lucy read that twice. Delete the duplicate account. Merge the information. She remembered why she had started the conversation. The other Lucy Wallace. The older woman. The hospital patient. The person with the appendectomy. Lucy typed, "What about the other Lucy's account? Would it get messed up?" Merrill replied, "Does it matter if she's never been witnessed?" Lucy stared at the words. For several seconds, she felt like she was standing at the edge of something enormous. There was a question hidden inside that sentence. Something she probably should have understood. Something she probably should have been afraid of. Instead, Lucy was simply tired. Very tired. She had spent too long dealing with this. She still had medical bills spread across her living room. Her tea had gone cold. She had already started drinking wine. She wanted the whole thing finished. Whatever. Okay, do it. 1 second. Lucy leaned back against the couch. The apartment was completely quiet. She looked toward the dark window. For a moment, she remembered Marjorie sitting there earlier, staring outside with the wide-eyed expression cats sometimes got. Lucy had assumed the cat was watching a bird, but there had been nothing outside. Now, Lucy looked at the same darkness. Nothing, still nothing. Merrill's typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, all done. Here are the charges on your account. Ambulance services, $21.46 appendectomy, $8,456 primary care visit, $0. Would you like to review payment options? Lucy stared at the screen. At first, something seemed wrong. Then, the feeling passed. Actually, the charges looked right. Of course they did. She remembered leaving her vacation early because she had become sick. She had thought it was the flu at first. Then, the pain got worse. There had been an ambulance. Lucy could remember the inside of it. Bright lights above her. A paramedic asking questions. Someone putting something around her arm. Then, St. Mary's Hospital. White walls, harsh lights, doctors coming in and out. Someone telling her she needed surgery. Her appendix. Right, of course. How had she forgotten that? Lucy rubbed her stomach. She could almost remember the pain, the fear, waking up after surgery with her mouth dry and her body heavy. Someone had brought her water. Had that been a nurse? Maybe. Everything about the memory felt slightly distant, like an event she had not thought about in years. But it was definitely hers. It had happened. The bills made sense. Lucy felt foolish for getting so upset. She had contacted customer service over charges she actually owed. No wonder Merrill had struggled to verify her account. Lucy was exhausted. "No, thank you." Merrill responded, "You're welcome, Lucy. I'm glad I could be of assistance. Take care, and please provide feedback on the survey if you have a second." The chatbot disconnected. A small survey appeared. Lucy selected 5 stars. Merrill had been strange, but the problem was fixed. That was what mattered. Lucy closed the chat. She stood from the couch. A sharp pulling sensation came from the side of her abdomen. Lucy placed a hand against it. The scar from the appendectomy sometimes did that when she moved too quickly. She should probably be more careful. She walked toward the kitchen, deciding she needed something to eat before going to bed. Maybe crackers. Maybe another granola bar. She was too tired to cook anything. Marjorie? Lucy called for the cat as she opened a cupboard. There was no immediate response. Lucy was not worried. Marjorie was probably hiding somewhere. Cats did that. Lucy grabbed a snack and headed toward the bedroom. Behind her, the insurance letters remained scattered across the coffee table. One had her name, Lucy Wallace. Another had the same name. The birthdays had once been different. The histories had once been different. One Lucy had lived in Delaware. One had lived in Illinois. One had been born in 1993. One had been born in 1971. One had never undergone surgery. One had been taken by ambulance to St. Mary's and had her appendix removed. There had once been two separate sets of records, two histories, two lives. Now there was no error to correct. There was no duplicate account anymore. The information had been successfully merged, and there was only one Lucy Wallace.
When my brother took his own life, I decided that I needed to leave home when it was time for college. I still do not know how long he had been struggling before it happened. Maybe it had been months, maybe years, maybe there had been signs all around us and none of us had understood what they meant. I have spent enough nights asking myself those questions to know that I will probably never get an answer. The truth is, I do not like thinking about it anymore. All I know is that one night my brother Nick walked into the bathroom and never came back out. At first, no one thought much of it. Then enough time passed that my dad went to check on him. Nick did not answer when Dad knocked. He did not answer when Dad called his name. Eventually, my father forced the door open. By then, it was already too late. My parents protected me from what they found in that bathroom. They would not let me see him. They pushed me away from the hallway and kept me in another room while everything happened. But there are some things you do not need to see. Their screams told me enough. For a long time afterward, I sometimes wished they had let me see his body. I know how terrible that sounds. Maybe seeing him would have made it easier for my brain to understand that he was really gone. Instead, part of me kept waiting for him to walk back through the front door. Nick had been the brother who let me sit on his shoulders during fireworks because I was too short to see over the crowd. He was the brother who argued with me about who got the front seat in Dad's car. He was the one who taught me stupid jokes, showed me music my parents hated, and gave me advice even when I did not ask for it. He was a huge part of the person I became. Then, suddenly, he was gone. All he left behind was a letter. I read it more times than I can count. He apologized to all of us. He said he was sorry for the pain he was causing. He said there were things going on inside his head that he did not know how to explain. He asked us not to blame ourselves. Those apologies never made me feel better. Sometimes they made me angry. Come on, Nick. You expected me to believe you were sorry after leaving us like that? I needed you. Mom needed you. Dad needed you. We all did. And maybe the worst question was the one I never wanted to admit I was asking. Was I not good enough for you to talk to? Was there really nothing I could have done? I tortured myself with thoughts like that for almost 2 years. Eventually, I reached a point where I knew I could not keep living inside that night forever. I was not exactly moving on. I do not think you ever completely move on from something like that. I was simply trying to move forward. That was why I wanted to leave home for college. I had imagined getting a dorm room on campus, maybe with some annoying roommate who snored or stole my food. I imagined staying up late, meeting people, going to parties, doing all the normal college things that movies make look much more exciting than they really are. There was only one problem. I applied for housing too late. Every dorm was already taken. What I got instead was a cheap apartment outside the city. The building was old, the walls were thin, and the neighborhood was not exactly somewhere you would choose for a relaxing evening walk. Campus was a long bus ride away. Staying with my parents would have been cheaper and much easier. I did not care. I needed somewhere that did not remind me of Nick. The apartment at least gave me that. And there was one advantage. No roommates. At that point in my life, privacy sounded better than comfort. College itself started well. I had always been pretty good at talking to people, so making friends came naturally. I probably attended more parties and lectures during those first months, but somehow I kept my grades high enough that no one could complain. The only annoying part was transportation. If I stayed out too late, I risked missing the final bus home. More than once, I found myself leaving a party just when everyone else was starting to have fun. Still, compared with the previous 2 years of my life, things were good. Really good. I was smiling again. Not the fake smile I had worn around my parents so they would stop asking whether I was okay. A real one. I was even having some luck with girls. And by luck, I mean one girl gave me her number because we were assigned to the same group project. But I was counting it. I did not even have to put in any effort. My main concern was checking whether she had a boyfriend. I had learned that lesson once before, and I strongly recommend not repeating my mistakes. One afternoon, after a long day of lectures, I got off the bus and dragged myself back toward my apartment. I had one goal: open the door, fall onto the couch, and sleep. The couch was closer to the entrance than my bed, which made it the better option. I considered myself a man of efficiency and laziness. That was when I found the first tape. I should admit that I may have stopped at the student union bar before leaving campus. There may have been more than one drink involved. So when I reached my apartment door, I almost stepped directly on the object sitting in front of it. Instead, I tripped over it and slammed shoulder first into the door. After blaming the universe for attacking me, I looked down. A Via's tape was lying at my feet. I picked it up and turned it over. There was no note, no explanation, no title, nothing telling me what was recorded on it. The only thing written on the label was a name. Tyler. Well, my name was not Tyler. I stood in the hallway staring at it. My first thought was that I could not remember the last time I had even seen a Via's player. My second thought was much more important. Who had left it outside my apartment? I looked down both sides of the hallway. No one. Maybe one of my friends was trying to prank me. That seemed possible, although it was not much of a prank considering I had no way to play the thing. Maybe one of my neighbors had left it there. Maybe the tape contained some angry message about me coming home drunk and making noise in the hallway. But if that was the case, why not simply knock on my door and talk to me? The alcohol was not helping my thinking. I had a test coming up that I desperately needed to avoid studying for, so I decided I would worry about the tape later. I carried it inside, dropped it on a shelf, and went back to my plan of doing absolutely nothing for the evening. I figured I would ask around campus until I found someone with a VH player. There had to be at least one film student who collected old equipment. Then I completely forgot about it. I would like to say that happened because I became deeply focused on my education. That would be a lie. I remembered the tape only because another one appeared a week later. Again, it was sitting directly outside my door. Again, I almost stepped on it. Whoever was leaving these things seriously overestimated my ability to notice objects on the floor. This second tape looked exactly like the first. Gray plastic. Old label. One name. Susie. I carried it inside and placed it beside Tyler. Then I forgot about both of them. The next day, another tape appeared. Then another. Soon, it became a daily thing. Every tape looked the same. There were no messages and no explanations, just names written on the labels. Amy, Luz, Pedro, Andy, Alexa, Samantha list kept growing. At first, curiosity was stronger than fear. I searched the names online, wondering if they were characters from some old movie series or maybe titles of forgotten short films. I found nothing. There was no pattern that I could see. The pile slowly grew in my apartment. After a while, curiosity turned into irritation. I asked my friends whether any of them were behind it. Every person I asked looked genuinely confused, and honestly, my apartment was too far away from campus for most of them to make the trip every day just to leave an old tape at my door. That would have been a huge amount of work for a joke that was barely funny. So I started asking the neighbors. Nobody admitted anything. I was not completely convinced they were telling the truth, especially Mrs. Glenn, who lived upstairs, not because she seemed evil. Mrs. Glenn was probably in her late 60s, and I was about 90% sure she had been flirting with me since the day I moved in. While I was carrying boxes into the apartment, she kept offering to help. But most of her helping involved touching my arms and telling me I was strong. She had also invited me to dinner several times. Alone, a much older woman making moves on a college freshman seemed like enough of a warning sign. For a few uncomfortable days, I became terrified that the tapes might contain something involving Mrs. Glenn that I absolutely did not want to see. That possibility was almost enough to make me throw them all away. Instead, I started seriously looking for a VHS player. That turned out to be harder than expected. Every conversation went the same way. Someone knew someone who might have an uncle who once owned one. Then that person would remember it had been thrown away years ago. I considered buying a used player, but my bank account was already struggling. Food and rent were more important than solving some strange mystery involving outdated technology. I probably would have ignored the tapes forever. Then, whoever was leaving them became more aggressive. Instead of one tape, two began appearing. Then three. A few weeks later, I opened my door and found an entire pile waiting for me. At that point, my living room was becoming ridiculous. I had stacks of tapes beside the couch, under the coffee table, and against the wall. It felt like someone was demanding that I watch them. Fine, message received. If someone wanted me to watch these things that badly, they could at least have left a machine with them. I still was not truly frightened. Nothing threatening had been written on the tapes. There were no photographs of me, no notes saying I was being watched, no blood, nothing obviously dangerous. As far as I knew, someone with a large collection of useless VHS tapes had decided to use my apartment as a dumping ground. Still, I began paying more attention to my friends. A couple of them seemed to laugh whenever the tapes came up in conversation. They also asked about them more often than I thought was normal. Maybe they were waiting for me to finally watch one. Maybe this entire thing was a prank and they wanted a reaction. Whatever was happening, I needed answers. Eventually, I asked some students from the film department. I should have done that immediately. Of course, they had access to a VH player. Sometimes stereotypes save time. The only reason I had started talking to the film students was because the girl from my group project did, in fact, have a boyfriend. So that romantic plan died quickly. Her boyfriend studied film though, which finally made him useful to me. Do not worry about my love life. Another group project had already introduced me to 2 more girls, and I was confident I would find a way to ruin those chances too. The film students thought my mystery tape situation was hilarious. The VH player belonged to the university, so they could not let me take it home. I would have to bring the tapes to them. That was fine with me. The next day, I grabbed around 12 tapes from the pile and shoved them into my backpack. By then, I had stopped paying attention to the names. I simply grabbed whatever was closest. The students showed me the room where the player was kept and told me they had lectures for the next hour. They said they would come back afterward and watch some of the tapes with me. So, I was alone. The room was buried at the back of an old building near the photography department. It smelled like cigarettes, damp walls, and something that may have been urine. There was an exit nearby that opened into an ugly alley, so the smell was not exactly surprising. I pulled an old wooden chair in front of the television and opened my backpack. The first tape I picked up was labeled Adam. Getting it into the machine took much longer than I want to admit. Yes, I understand that you basically put the tape into the slot. Somehow, I managed to overthink it. Then I kept pressing the wrong buttons. Finally, I realized the entire machine was not switched on. I have never claimed to be a genius. When everything was finally ready, I sat back with the remote in my hand. For the first time, I hesitated. I had spent weeks wanting to know what was recorded on those tapes. Now that I could finally find out, part of me wanted to keep the mystery alive. Maybe another part of me was afraid. I pressed play. Static filled the television. The image jumped several times before becoming clear enough to understand. A cliff appeared on the screen. There was a road running close to its edge with a metal barrier separating it from the drop. Trees and thick vegetation surrounded the area. Far away, another cliff rose across the landscape, making the entire place look like the edge of some huge valley. The sky was pale blue. Clouds drifted slowly above it. Nothing happened. I waited. The speakers connected to the old television barely worked, but I could hear a soft wind in the background. Branches moved. Leaves shook. That was all. Then a blue Ford suddenly raced into view. It came down the road far too quickly. Before I fully understood what was happening, the car smashed through the barrier and disappeared over the cliff. The sound stopped almost immediately. I stared at the television. Then, embarrassingly, I laughed. It had happened with such strange timing that it felt like a comedy video. You know those short clips online where something unexpected happens and the video ends at exactly the right second? It felt like that. Maybe these were strange comedy sketches, or deleted scenes from some movie. The camera remained fixed on the empty road as if nothing had happened. Eventually, I stopped the tape. The next one was labeled Angela. I put it in. This footage showed a hotel swimming pool at night. Most of the area was dark. Moonlight reflected across the water, but almost everything beyond the pool was hidden in shadow. For a while, nothing moved. Then a light came on somewhere high above the pool, probably one of the hotel rooms. The light had an orange-yellow glow, but because it was several floors up, it did not illuminate much. I was still staring at it when something suddenly fell from above. There was a heavy impact. I almost jumped out of the chair. Whatever had fallen was now lying beside the pool. I rewound the footage because it happened too quickly for me to understand what I had seen. When I played it again, I realized the object looked human. At first, I convinced myself it was a stunt dummy. It had to be. The body had landed in a position that did not look natural. I told myself the joke was that someone had tried to jump into the swimming pool and completely missed. But I did not laugh this time. Something had changed. A small feeling of fear had started growing in my stomach. I removed Angela and picked up another tape. Pascal, the footage was almost too dark to see. It showed some kind of study or office. A lamp was the only real source of light. On the wall, I could see the shadow of a man sitting in a chair. He was holding something long in front of himself. For several seconds, I could not understand what I was looking at. Then there was a sudden loud sound. The image changed in a way that made my stomach turn. I stopped the tape immediately. I sat there staring at the blank screen. Maybe it was a special effect. Maybe all of these were movie scenes. But why were they so different from each other? Different locations, different people, different cameras, different styles. What kind of movie needed dozens of unrelated death scenes? More importantly, why had someone left these tapes at my apartment? Was this supposed to be a threat? I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe one of my friends had found a collection of old horror footage and decided it would be funny to scare me. I thought about reporting the tapes to the university, but they had been left at my apartment off campus. I thought about calling the police. Then I imagined trying to explain the situation. "Hello, officer. Someone keeps leaving old VH tapes outside my door. And they contain disturbing videos. Would they even take that seriously? I had only watched 3. There were dozens more. Maybe the rest were harmless. For some reason I still cannot explain, I picked up another one. Alvin, this tape was much clearer. An older man stood in the center of a small room. He looked somewhere between 50 and 60. A wooden stool was in front of him. The camera angle was awkward, and I could see very little of the room, but his face was clear. He looked exhausted, not physically tired, something deeper. He sat on the stool and unfolded a piece of paper. For several minutes he read it, again and again. His fingers moved nervously. His eyes traveled across the same lines over and over as if he was trying to convince himself of something. Then he stood. The paper slipped from his hand and landed on the floor. I immediately felt uncomfortable. I knew where the scene seemed to be going. Everything inside me wanted to stop the video, but I could not. Something about the man reminded me of Nick. Not his face, not his age, just the sadness in him. I kept thinking that someone would enter the room. Maybe the man would change his mind. Maybe he would sit back down. Maybe he would remember that someone loved him. I wanted the tape to prove my fear wrong. It did not. The man made his decision. Almost immediately afterward, his body began fighting against that decision. That was what disturbed me most. His movements became desperate. There was no peaceful acceptance, no calm ending. His body struggled to survive even though he had been the one who put himself there. I could see panic in his face. Regret, fear, his hands desperately tried to undo what he had done. I wanted to turn the television off. My thumb rested over the button, but I could not press it. I kept thinking about Nick. Had he regretted it too? Had there been one final second when he wanted to live? Had he been afraid? Had he wished someone would open that bathroom door? The man on the tape finally stopped moving. I sat frozen. Until that moment, part of me had still believed I was watching actors. Now I understood. No actor could make that silence feel so real. No film crew would simply stand there and do nothing. No one behind the camera had tried to help. The realization hit me all at once. This was not a movie. I switched off the tape and threw the remote toward the television. What the hell? I stood so quickly that the chair almost fell behind me. What the hell is this? My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. When the film students returned, they found me pacing around the room. One of them stopped at the doorway. "Man, what happened?" "Call the police." They looked at each other. "What?" "Call the police right now." I must have looked completely insane. They tried asking what I had seen, but I could barely explain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man from the tape. Except after a few seconds, his face became Nick's. One of the students reached toward the remote. I slapped her hand away. Don't. She jumped backward. What is wrong with you? Do not play it. Just call the police. Eventually, they did. The tapes were taken away. Then, police officers came to my apartment and collected every single one that had been left there. The investigation took time, longer than I wanted. What they eventually told me was worse than anything I had imagined. Every tape they examined showed a real death. Every one. The officers said I had actually been fortunate with the few I chose to watch. Some of the other recordings were much worse. I did not feel fortunate. Investigators managed to connect many of the names on the tapes to real cases from years earlier. Different cities, different states, different years. Some were old enough that the cases had almost been forgotten. A few people could not be identified at all. Police suspected they may have lived in other countries. That created another question no one could answer. Who had filmed them? Some of the recordings appeared to have been made from places where no normal camera should have been. Others showed deaths that had supposedly happened with nobody else around. The police became very interested in that part. I became interested in something else. Why had the tapes been left for me? I refused to return to my apartment. My parents came and picked me up. Even after police removed all the tapes and promised to patrol the area, I could not imagine sleeping there again. Every time I pictured that hallway, I imagined another gray cassette sitting outside my door. The police believed the tapes might have been a threat. Maybe someone wanted to frighten me. Maybe someone had chosen me randomly. Maybe the person responsible had some connection to one of the victims. I did not believe any of those explanations. Deep down, I knew why the tapes had been left for me. Someone wanted me to watch them. Someone wanted me to see what death looked like when there was no one there to protect me from it. My parents had kept me away from the bathroom that night. They had shielded me from Nick's body. For years, part of me had wondered whether seeing him would have helped, whether seeing the truth with my own eyes would finally make me understand. The person leaving those tapes had somehow known that. They had given me dozens of chances to look, dozens of strangers, dozens of deaths. They were preparing me. I realized this while standing beside one of the officers as he sealed the final tapes into evidence bags. I watched him pick one up from the floor. For a moment, I almost ignored the name. After seeing so many, they had started to blur together. Tyler, Susie, Adam, Angela, Pascal, Alvin, names of strangers whose final moments had somehow found their way to my front door. Then I looked again. The officer turned the cassette slightly as he placed it inside the evidence bag. There was one word written across the label in black ink, a name I had known my entire life, a name I had not said out loud nearly enough during the last 2 years. Nick.
Your friendly neighborhood fast food worker here. I usually work the night shift, and I have a strange question. Does anyone else work under conditions like these? Or is my workplace the only one where the rules stop making sense after midnight? I know how stupid that sounds. Believe me, I do. If someone had told me this story before I started working here, I would have laughed at them. I probably would have asked what they were smoking. But after 5 months on the job, I can honestly say this is the strangest place I have ever worked. I am not going to tell you the name of the restaurant. I do not want the company coming after me or threatening to sue me for damaging its reputation. I will only say that it is a very famous fast food chain. We sell burgers, fries, shakes, and all the usual things. You have almost certainly seen one of our restaurants before. That is as specific as I am willing to be. During the day, the place is completely normal. Customers walk in, order food, complain about prices, and leave ketchup packets all over the tables. Lunch is always chaotic, and dinner is even worse, especially on weekends. Parents bring in screaming children. Teenagers stand at the counter for 10 minutes before deciding what they want. People order enough food for a small army and then act surprised when it takes longer than 30 seconds. It is annoying, but it is ordinary. After midnight, it is not ordinary at all. When I was hired, My manager gave me a sheet of rules for the night shift. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke played on new employees. The rules were too strange to be real. They described exact times, unusual customers, and very specific things we were supposed to say or do. My manager made me read every line twice. Then he looked directly at me and said that if I wanted to remain alive, sane, and employed, I would follow them without asking questions. I laughed. He did not. The rules only apply after midnight. No one has explained why. The building does not suddenly change shape, and there is no dramatic sign that something has begun. The lights stay on. The grills keep cooking. The soft drink machine continues making that annoying humming sound. Yet, once the clock passes 12, certain things happen at exactly the same time every night. The first part of the shift is usually filled with the people you would expect. We get drunk college students, bored teenagers, tired delivery drivers, and groups of loud guys who have been partying. Anyone who has worked late at a fast food restaurant knows the type. A car full of people pulls into the drive-thru. Everyone shouts a different order at once. And then they spend 5 minutes arguing about who is paying. They nearly always ask for ice cream. I do not understand why, but everyone wants ice cream late at night. Half the time, the machine is being cleaned, and then they act as if I personally ruined their entire evening. Still, those customers are only irritating. They collect their food and drive away. Compared with what comes later, I am always relieved to see them. The first real rule concerns 12:13 a.m. At exactly that time, the entire drive-thru becomes empty. I do not mean that business becomes quiet and no new customers arrive. I mean that every car already in the line disappears. One night, we had 5 cars waiting. I had already taken their orders, and my coworker Dave was preparing the drinks. We both kept looking at the clock because we knew what was coming. My hands were sweating so badly that I almost dropped a bag of fries. At 12:12, I could still hear engines outside and customers talking through the speakers. One man had already paid. I watched him drive around the corner toward the pickup window. I picked up his 2 bags and stepped forward, ready to hand them to him. The clock changed to 12:13. The lane was empty. The man's car had been only a few feet away, but it was gone. So were the 4 cars behind him. There were no headlights on the road and no sound of engines fading into the distance. They had not driven away. They had simply stopped existing, as if someone had erased them from the night. I stood at the window holding 2 warm bags of food and staring at bare pavement. That is why I am asking people not to visit fast food restaurants around that time. Come at 11 p.m. Come at 12:30 a.m. Better yet, stay home and cook something. Just do not enter our drive-thru shortly before 12:13. I am tired of watching people vanish. Our official policy is to stop serving food 5 minutes before it happens. We place cones across the entrance and block the drive-thru. According to my manager, it took the restaurant years to discover the correct timing. If we close it too early or too late, we anger him. No one explained who him was when I first started. I eventually found out. 2 minutes after the cars disappear, at exactly 12:15 a.m., a brown Chevrolet Impala enters the drive-thru. It is always the same car. The paint looks old but perfectly clean, and its engine makes almost no sound. A man sits behind the wheel wearing a dark trench coat and a fedora. I have never seen his face clearly, even when the lights above the windows are shining directly into the car. He never places an order. When he reaches the payment window, the employee standing there must say, "Good morning." Nothing else. When he passes the pickup window, whoever is working there must say, "Good night." That is all we are allowed to do. We must not ask what he wants. We must not tell him that the drive-thru is closed. We must not comment on the weather or try to make polite conversation. We say good morning at the first window and good night at the second. If we do that correctly, he drives away and does not return until the end of the shift. He appears every single night. Compared with our other regular customers, he is almost harmless. I do not like him, but at least he follows a pattern. At 1:00 a.m., the family arrives. They are the only customers we serve inside the restaurant after midnight, though allow inside would not be the right way to describe it. We have no control over whether they enter. Locking the doors does nothing. Closing the windows does nothing. Before I was hired, the staff once barricaded every entrance with tables, chairs, and heavy kitchen equipment. At exactly 1 o'clock, the family was standing at the counter anyway. No one saw them enter. One moment, the restaurant was empty, and the next, they were simply there. We now leave the front door unlocked. There is no point pretending it can keep them out. The family always has 4 members, 2 adults and 2 children. At least, that is how they normally appear. The strangest part is that they look different each night, while still somehow being the same people. Their races change without any pattern. Sometimes the father is black while the others are white. Sometimes one child is Asian and the rest of the family is not. Their hair, skin, and faces may change, but their clothes, movements, and empty expressions remain familiar. The adults never speak. The children order for everyone. Their order is always the same: 2 large meals for the children and 2 children's meals for the adults, with no mayonnaise and no pickles. They stand perfectly still while we prepare it. When we place the bags on the counter, all 4 of them look inside at the same moment. Then they raise their heads and smile together. They leave as silently as they arrived. I try not to look at them for too long. Their smiles are too wide, and they hold them for too many seconds. Only once did their routine change. The family appeared at 1 o'clock, but this time one of the children had brought a dog. Animals are not allowed inside the restaurant. But what were we supposed to do? Ask this family to leave? Call the police and explain that 4 people had appeared inside a locked building? The child gave us the usual order. We prepared 2 large meals and 2 children's meals, without mayonnaise or pickles. They checked the bags and smiled together, exactly as always. Then the person who looked like the mother turned toward me. She opened her mouth and barked. It was not a playful imitation. It was the deep, angry bark of a large dog. At the same moment, the actual dog looked at me with an expression that seemed almost human. Then the family walked out and disappeared into the dark parking lot. I do not like remembering that night. At 2 a.m., 5 cars arrive one after another. We call the drivers the 2 o'clock group. 4 of them wear brightly colored shirts: yellow, red, blue, and green. The 5th person is known only as the last guy. We take their orders in the same order that they arrive. The problem is that when the cars reach the pickup window, the drivers have changed positions. The man in yellow may suddenly be in the 3rd car instead of the 1st. The woman in blue might be driving a different vehicle. Sometimes 2 cars seem to switch completely, even though there is no space in the narrow lane for one to pass another. It is extremely confusing. Watching it happen makes your head hurt because your memory tells you one thing while your eyes show you another. The first 4 customers do not usually cause trouble. We just have to pay attention to their food and recognize their shirts rather than their cars. The last guy is different. He is always last, no matter how many times everyone changes position. He has very little patience, and he does not forgive mistakes. Dave once gave him the wrong order. The last guy leaned through the window and punched Dave directly in the nose. It seemed like a severe reaction to receiving the wrong fries, but that is how he behaves. Do not feel too sorry for Dave. He did not make the mistake because the cars had switched. He knew exactly which order belonged to the last guy. He simply picked up the wrong bag because he was not paying attention. Dave is an idiot. I cannot say that enough. After the 2 o'clock group leaves, the shift becomes genuinely dangerous. At exactly 2:57 a.m., the oil in every fryer begins to heat up. It does not matter whether the fryers are switched on or unplugged. The oil starts bubbling, then boiling, then roaring, as if a fire is burning underneath it. The temperature rises faster every second. Plastic containers near the fryers soften and bend. Sometimes their sides melt until they collapse onto the counter. We cannot stop it. We just step away and wait. At precisely 3 a.m., the boiling ends. The oil returns to its normal temperature immediately. Even stranger, every damaged object repairs itself. Melted containers become solid and return to their original shapes. Splashes vanish from the walls. It looks as though the previous 3 minutes never happened. Then the feasting hour begins. From 3:00 until 3:30, customers can still place orders, but none of the food may be given to them. The workers must eat everything that is ordered. If someone asks for a cheeseburger, we eat it. If they ask for fries, chicken, 2 shakes, and an apple pie, we have to finish all of it. It does not matter how full or sick we feel. Every item must be eaten before the half hour ends. Most regular late-night customers know something is wrong. They see us accepting the order and then eating it behind the window. Some shout at us. Others demand refunds. We ignore them because angering a customer is safer than breaking the rule. I learned that during my first week. I thought the feasting rule was ridiculous, so I refused to eat an order. I had already eaten dinner and was not hungry. I told Dave he could have it if he wanted, but I was not forcing down another burger just because a piece of paper told me to. A few minutes later, Dave struck the side of a fryer with a metal basket. Hot oil flew over the edge and covered my arm. The fryers were supposed to have returned to normal by then, but the oil that touched me was hotter than anything I had ever felt. The pain was immediate and total. My skin seemed to burn all the way down to the bone. I screamed until my throat hurt, and when I looked at my arm, I was certain I would never use it properly again. If you ever wonder what boiling oil feels like, stop wondering. You do not want to know. And just to be perfectly clear, do not try it. I may be stupid, but even I am not suggesting that. The ambulance took me to the hospital. The doctors said the burns were severe and that I would need a long recovery. Yet when I woke the next morning, my arm was completely normal. There were no burns, no blisters, and no scars. Even the pain was gone. Apparently, the restaurant punishes us when we break a rule, but it does not always allow the damage to remain. I do not understand why. Maybe it wants us frightened rather than dead. Since then, I have eaten every order during the feasting hour. At 3:30, it ends, and we are free to serve customers normally again for another 30 minutes. At 4 a.m., everything must stop. No food may be cooked, served, or eaten after 4, not by the employees and not by the customers. If someone arrives hungry, we turn them away. If there are fries left beneath the heat lamp, we do not touch them. Even a single bite is too much. This is the most important rule. Breaking the earlier ones can lead to painful, frightening, or confusing consequences. Breaking the 4 o'clock rule changes a person. We used to have another coworker named Stephen. He was a big man who ate more than Dave and I could manage together. He was decent at the job and usually followed every rule. I suspected that he used drugs, but what he did one morning was not caused by drugs. Shortly after 4, Stephen forgot the rule and ate a few fries. At first, nothing happened. He chewed, swallowed, and continued cleaning the counter. Then his body became completely still. His eyes opened so wide that I could see white all around them. Saliva began running down his chin. He slowly turned toward our manager. Without saying a word, Stephen attacked him. He dragged the manager across the kitchen and tried to force him into one of the fryers. Dave and I grabbed Stephen, but he had become unbelievably strong. By the time we pulled him away, our manager's lower body was already in the oil. Stephen did not look angry. He looked hungry. It took both of us and another employee to hold him down until the police arrived. Even then, he kept snapping his teeth and staring at the manager as if the man were a piece of meat. Stephen was arrested, and as far as I know, he is still in jail. Our manager returned to work without a single scar. Like my arm and the melted containers, his body had repaired itself by the next day. But his mind did not recover in the same way. Every night at 2:57, when the oil begins to boil, he moves to the farthest corner of the kitchen. He watches the fryers with a pale face and refuses to stand close to them. He can be a difficult man, but I feel sorry for him. Some injuries remain even when the skin looks perfect. That is an ordinary night at my job, if the word ordinary can be used for any of this. My shift ends at 5 a.m. There is only one final event before I can leave. The man in the brown Impala returns. My manager calls him the owner. The rest of us simply call him him. He drives to the pickup window and looks inside. If we followed every rule, served the right people, ate every order during the feasting hour, and touched no food after 4, he speaks 2 words. Good job. Then he drives away, and I go home as quickly as possible. There is more I could say about him, but that is a story for another time. For now, I only want to know if anyone has experienced anything similar. Does your night shift have rules like ours? Do customers disappear at exact times? Does your manager treat impossible events like normal company policy? I started writing this on my phone because I needed to vent. I am sitting alone in the restaurant now, eating some fries left over from the feasting hour. A customer ordered them a few minutes ago. Working alone at night is always fun. Actually, something strange is happening. The clocks on the wall show a different time from my phone. I keep checking them, but the difference is still there. At least my shift will be over soon. I have also been feeling a little odd for the past several minutes. I had planned to quit today. Maybe I would wait until tomorrow. The pay is decent, but no amount of money feels worth this insanity. All right, I lied earlier. I do not earn minimum wage. They pay us much more than that. Now you understand why people continue working here. Even so, I do not know how much longer I can tolerate it. Wait, was daylight saving time today? Dave was supposed to adjust the restaurant clocks. He probably forgot. As I have already explained, Dave is an idiot, but I cannot remember which way the clocks are supposed to change. Do they move backward by an hour or forward? Dave just arrived to take over the next shift. I can see him outside, struggling with his entry card even though he uses it every day. I was serious about quitting when I began writing this, but now I am not so sure. Maybe I should stay. I can speak to the manager later. The money really is good, and perhaps the rules are not impossible to live with once you become used to them. Besides, I get very hungry when I am here, and the food smells wonderful. Dave has finally opened the door. He is walking toward me now, still staring down at his card. He really is an idiot. Yes, I think I will remain for another shift. I will work a few more hours with Dave. I need the money, and I do not feel tired anymore. In fact, I feel better than I have in months. And Dave smells delicious. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story.
My grandfather passed away in the spring and left me his property deep in the forests of Washington. The place is so far from everything that there are no neighbors close enough to see from the house. At night, there are no porch lights in the distance, no sounds of traffic, and no voices from nearby homes. There is only the cabin, the trees, and whatever happens to be moving between them. The nearest town is about 20 minutes away if the roads are dry and you do not mind driving fast. Half the route is gravel and dirt, and parts of the rest look as if someone started paving them years ago and simply gave up. After heavy rain, the trip takes longer. Mud collects in deep holes, and water runs across the road in places. It is the kind of drive that makes you check your fuel before leaving town, because getting stranded out here would mean a very long walk. I had not visited the property since I was a child. Most of my memories of it were incomplete. I remembered the smell of wood smoke, a rusted metal swing hanging from an old branch, and my grandfather telling me not to wander too far behind the cabin. I also remembered how dark the forest looked from the back porch, even in the middle of the day. At the time, I thought every forest looked that way. My grandfather and I were never especially close during the final years of his life. There was no argument between us. Life simply moved on. I moved away, found work when I could, and became involved in a relationship that I thought would last. He remained here, alone, and rarely asked anyone for help. We spoke on holidays and sometimes on birthdays. Every conversation ended with one of us promising to call again soon. Usually, neither of us did. Then he died, and the lawyer contacted me about the property. The timing was strange but useful. My relationship had ended only a short time earlier. I suppose some things are not meant to work out, no matter how much effort you put into them. Once it was over, I looked around my apartment and realized there was nothing keeping me there. I had no permanent job, my lease was almost finished, and most of the people I called friends belonged more to my former partner than to me. Staying felt harder than leaving, so I packed everything that mattered into my truck and moved into my grandfather's cabin. Otis came with me. He is a blue healer, energetic, stubborn, and usually fearless. He has been beside me through almost everything, and I was glad to have him when I made the drive into the woods for the first time in years. We arrived about a month ago. The cabin is small, with 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The living room and kitchen are separated by a narrow wooden bar that my grandfather probably built himself. Almost everything inside creaks. The floorboards creak under my feet. The walls creak when the wind blows. The roof makes quiet snapping sounds at night as the temperature drops. Even the kitchen cupboards complain when I open them. A visible layer of dust covered most surfaces when I arrived. It was thick enough that my fingers left clean lines wherever I touched. My grandfather must not have been able to keep up with the place during his last years. That was difficult to think about. He had always seemed strong in my childhood memories, the kind of man who could repair a fence before breakfast and split wood until sunset. Seeing the cabin slowly falling apart made it easier to understand how much time had passed. There was enough work here to keep me busy for months. At least 1 bedroom needs new electrical wiring. The water heater makes a deep knocking sound every time I use hot water, as if someone is trapped inside and hitting the metal walls with a tool. The porch is rotting and will have to be removed before someone steps through it. Several windows do not close properly, the gutters are full of moss, and part of the roof leaks when the rain is heavy. I honestly do not mind. Working with my hands keeps me from thinking too much about everything I lost. I wake early, make coffee, and choose one problem to deal with. Some days I repair something. Other days I discover 3 more things that need attention. It gives structure to my time, and right now I have more time than I know what to do with. The first 2 weeks passed without anything unusual happening. Most of my days were spent driving to the hardware store and returning with lumber, nails, wire, tools, or some small part I had forgotten on the previous trip. I explored the town and learned where to buy groceries, where to get decent coffee, and which gas stations stayed open late. The people there have been friendly. A few recognized my last name and asked if I was related to my grandfather. Some had known him for years. They described him as quiet but dependable. One older man at the hardware store said my grandfather had helped repair his roof after a storm and refused to accept payment. A woman at the small grocery shop remembered that he always bought the same coffee and never came into town after sunset. That last detail caught my attention, but only for a moment. Older people often develop routines. Maybe his eyesight had become poor, or maybe he simply did not like driving on those roads in the dark. At first, living here felt like the perfect new beginning. The air smelled of wet earth, pine, and rain. Morning fog moved between the trees like smoke. When sunlight reached the clearing, everything looked green and alive. At night, I sat on the front steps with Otis and listened to insects, owls, and the distant movement of animals. I had spent so many years surrounded by traffic and other people's noise that the silence felt like medicine. Then I began noticing small things that did not feel right. The first was Otis. The property opens into a rough clearing around the cabin. Tall grass grows near the edges, and the forest begins behind the house in a thick wall of cedar, fir, and undergrowth. Otis explores almost every part of the clearing. He chases birds, follows scents, and runs circles around the shed. But he will not go near the tree line at the back of the property. It is not normal fear. He does not bark or growl. The hair along his back does not rise. He simply refuses to continue. The first time it happened, I thought his leash had caught on something. We had been walking behind the cabin while I examined a section of damaged fencing. Otis trotted ahead until he reached a point about 15 feet from the trees. Then he stopped so suddenly that the leash pulled tight. I called him. He did not move. I encouraged him with a treat and stepped toward the woods. Otis planted all 4 feet in the ground and leaned backward. His ears lowered, and he looked at me as if I were asking him to walk into a fire. When I moved back toward the cabin, he immediately relaxed and followed. Since then, I have tested him in different places along the rear edge of the property. The result is always the same. Otis runs freely until he reaches an invisible line. Then he stops. That line is not perfectly straight, but it seems to follow the shape of the forest. In some places he will approach within 10 feet of the first trees. In others, he stops much farther away. I walked across it myself several times, watching him from the other side. He whined quietly but would not follow. I called his name and slapped my leg. Usually that is enough to make him come running. This time, he lowered his body and stared past me into the woods. The strange part was that he did not seem to be looking at me. His eyes stayed fixed on something behind my left shoulder. I turned around, but there was nothing there except tree trunks, ferns, and deep shadow. Otis has never behaved this way before. Blue heelers are working dogs. Running, exploring, and following movement are part of their nature. He has tried to chase deer. He once stood his ground against a much larger dog. But something about the forest behind his cabin makes him act as if crossing that invisible boundary is impossible. I tried to explain it in ordinary ways. Maybe he smells a bear, cougar, or another predator. Maybe there is some plant back there that irritates him. Animals notice things people cannot. All of those explanations are reasonable. But if it were only an animal, I would expect the scent to move or fade. Otis refuses to cross the same boundary every day. The second thing began at night. Twice now, I have heard something moving outside after I went to bed. Both times it came from behind the cabin, close to the tree line. The first time, I assumed it was a deer or elk pushing through the brush. Large animals live all over this area, and I had already found tracks near the road. I lay awake and listened as branches snapped and wet leaves shifted. At first, the sound moved in the steady 4-beat rhythm of an animal walking on 4 legs. Then it changed. There were 2 heavier steps, a pause, and then a dragging sound. After that, it seemed to drop low again and move quickly through the brush. The rhythm kept changing. 4 steps, then 2. A long pause. Something scraping against bark, then 4 steps again. It sounded as if the animal could not decide how it wanted to walk. Otis heard it too. He lifted his head from the floor beside my bed and stared toward the rear wall. He did not bark. That bothered me more than barking would have. He stayed perfectly still, ears raised, watching a place he could not possibly see through the wall. The movement stopped directly behind the cabin. For several minutes, there was no sound at all. Even the insects seemed quiet. I reached for the flashlight beside my bed and considered going outside, but I could not think of a good reason to do that. If it was a bear, stepping into the darkness would be foolish. If it was something else, I did not want to meet it while wearing sweatpants and carrying only a flashlight. Eventually, I heard the brush move again. Whatever was there returned toward the trees. The pattern changed several times as it went, as though it stood upright for a few steps and then lowered itself again. The second time happened 3 nights later. Rain was falling hard enough to strike the roof like handfuls of small stones. I was sitting in the living room, sorting through receipts from the repairs, when Otis rose and faced the back door. At first I heard nothing beyond the rain. Then something moved across the porch. The boards gave one slow creak near the left corner, followed by another closer to the door. The porch is weak, and even a small amount of weight makes it complain. Whatever had stepped onto it was heavy. I stood and listened. Otis backed away from the door without taking his eyes off it. There came another creak, then a soft bump against the outside wall. After that, I heard a sound low to the ground, almost like an animal sniffing along the gap beneath the door. I turned on the porch light. The noise stopped instantly. I looked through the small window in the door, but saw only rain falling through the yellow light. Nothing stood on the porch. I waited before opening the door, and when I finally checked, I found no clear prints. The rain may have washed them away, but the porch beneath the roof had remained mostly dry. That was when I started checking the locks twice before bed. Yesterday, I decided to clean the second bedroom. I had avoided it because my grandfather used it for storage, and nearly every inch was filled with his belongings. Old coats hung in the closet. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, most of them filled with paperwork. I assumed they contained tax records, bills, property documents, and other boring things that would eventually end up in the trash. I spent most of the afternoon sorting through them. The room smelled of dust, leather, and old paper. Every object seemed to hold some small part of my grandfather's life. There were receipts from stores that had closed years ago, photographs of people I did not recognize, and letters tied together with faded string. I found one picture of myself standing beside him near the back of the property. I could not have been more than 7. In the photograph, my grandfather had one hand on my shoulder. Neither of us was smiling. Behind us, several trees had strips of pale cloth tied around their trunks. I did not remember the picture being taken. I also had not seen any cloth tied to the trees since moving here. Near the back of the closet, behind 3 heavy boxes, I found something wrapped in an old red flannel shirt. It had not fallen there by accident. The shirt had been folded around it carefully, and the bundle had been pushed into the darkest corner behind the paperwork. Someone had wanted it hidden, protected, or both. Inside was a journal. It has a dark leather cover with no title or name. The leather is dry and cracked around the edges, and the pages have turned brown with age. Some feel so brittle that I am afraid they will tear if I turn them too quickly. It is clearly my grandfather's handwriting, though much of it is rough and difficult to understand. In some entries, the letters lean together as if he was writing in a hurry. Other pages are covered with short notes squeezed into every empty space. I have not read all of it yet. The journal is dense, and understanding certain sentences takes time. Some pages seem to describe ordinary work around the property, repairing fences, checking traps, clearing fallen branches, and watching weather patterns. Other entries are different. They contain times, directions, and repeated warnings. Several mention sounds near the back tree line. One sentence appears more than once. Do not follow it when it walks on 2 legs. I thought I had misunderstood the handwriting the first time. I found the same sentence again 20 pages later. Tucked into a pocket at the back of the journal was a folded map. It was drawn by hand on several pieces of paper joined with yellowing tape. It shows the cabin, the clearing, the shed, and a large area of forest behind the property. The detail is far greater than any normal survey map. Small streams are marked along with rock formations, old trails, fallen trees, and several places where the land drops sharply. There are symbols at specific points in the woods. I do not know what they mean. Some look like circles crossed by a single line. Others resemble small branching trees or figures with too many arms. Several sections have been circled repeatedly in red pencil. Dates are written beside many of the markings. There are dozens of dates. Some are from the years when my grandfather lived here. Others are much older. A few go back to a time before he was born. The handwriting changes beside those older dates, which suggests that someone else started the map and my grandfather continued it. One line appears to mark the same invisible boundary that Otis refuses to cross. I checked that part several times because I did not want to jump to conclusions. The line follows the uneven edge of the woods, moving closer to the cabin in some areas and farther away in others. It matches Otis's behavior almost exactly. Near the bottom of the map, my grandfather wrote a note in darker ink. The first few words are clear. If the dog will not cross, trust him. The rest has faded so badly that I cannot read it. I do not know what any of this means. It could be connected to hunting or trapping. The symbols may show animal paths, places where he set equipment, or areas he considered unsafe because of the land. The strange sentences might have been written after his health began to fail. An old man living alone can develop fears and habits that make little sense to anyone else. Those are the explanations I keep repeating to myself. But the journal was hidden deliberately. The map marks the exact boundary Otis will not cross. My grandfather wrote about something that changed the way it walked, and I have heard movement outside doing exactly that. I also keep thinking about a childhood memory that returned while I studied the map. I remember standing on the back porch near sunset and seeing my grandfather at the tree line. He was tying something around a trunk. When I started walking toward him, he shouted at me to stop. I had never heard him sound that frightened before. He came back across the clearing, lifted me into his arms, and carried me inside. That night, he pushed a chair beneath the back door handle. The next morning, he acted as if nothing had happened. Until yesterday, I had forgotten all of it. I am going to read the journal properly, from the first page to the last, instead of jumping between entries. I want to understand the symbols and arrange the dates in order. If this was only my grandfather's private hobby, I will probably feel foolish for worrying. I hope that is what happens. For now, I have moved the journal and map into my bedroom. Otis is lying beside me as I write this. It is after midnight, and rain has started tapping against the windows again. About 10 minutes ago, he raised his head and looked toward the back wall. I have not heard anything yet, but he has not looked away. I am writing this down because I do not want to convince myself later that I imagined these details. Isolation can affect people. Grief can do strange things to the mind. Maybe the sounds are animals, maybe the map is harmless, and maybe Otis is reacting to a scent I cannot detect. But if this is not nothing, I want there to be a record of when I first noticed it. And if the journal explains what is living in the woods behind my grandfather's cabin, I think I need to know before it decides to cross the line itself.
A little girl called me Grandma last night. I know how that sounds, especially because I am a 33-year-old man. I wish that was the strangest part. My mother has been dead since November 2019. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks passed between the day she was diagnosed and the day we buried her. 11 weeks sounds like enough time when you say it out loud, but it was not. One day, she was complaining that food tasted strange and that she was tired all the time. A few weeks later, there was a hospital bed in the living room and bottles of medication lined up beside the couch. Then she was gone. I was 26 when she died. I am 33 now, and until yesterday, the worst thing connected to her was a box of Christmas decorations sitting inside a storage unit. There was a ceramic angel in that box, with one broken wing. Mom had owned it for as long as I could remember. Every December, she would place it on top of the tree, even though it had been damaged years earlier. I used to hate looking at it after she died. Now, I would give anything for the broken angel to be the worst thing I found. I need to explain what happened from the beginning, because otherwise, none of this is going to make sense. When Mom died, my older sister Maya handled almost everything. That is the kind of person Maya is. She has always been organized. When we were children, she made lists for vacations. She labeled school folders by subject and color. She reminded our parents about birthdays and appointments. So when Mom became sick, Maya took control. She called hospice. She spoke to doctors. She arranged medication deliveries. After Mom died, Maya called the funeral home, the bank, the landlord, the insurance company, and everyone else who needed to know. I mostly showed up where I was told. I packed boxes. I carried furniture. I tried not to look at the hospital bed still sitting in our mother's living room. There were things neither of us could bring ourselves to throw away. Christmas decorations, photographs, old clothes, books with Mom's notes written in the margins, kitchen things she had owned for decades, a cheap lamp that had stood in the hallway of every apartment we lived in growing up. We did not want all of it, but throwing it away felt wrong. So we rented a storage unit at Storage King off Route 9. We told each other we would go through everything later. When we're ready. That became the phrase. We were never ready. The storage unit sat untouched for years. The rent came out automatically from a joint bank account Maya and I had forgotten to close. Every few months, one of us would mention that we should finally deal with it. Neither of us ever did. Then, last month, Storage King sent us a letter. They were renovating the property. All the old units were being converted into climate-controlled storage. Everything had to be removed by the 22nd. Anything left behind would eventually be sold or thrown away. Maya was in Denver for work, so she asked me to take care of it. I almost offered to pay Storage King for another year just so I would not have to go through Mom's things. Unfortunately, that was not an option. So on Tuesday, after work, I drove out there. I brought 2 coffees, even though I was alone. I do things like that sometimes. Old habits. Maybe part of me still expected Maya to show up. I also brought a roll of heavy contractor bags because I knew most of what was inside probably needed to be thrown away. The unit smelled exactly the way I remembered. Wet cardboard, dust, old fabric, and something strangely sweet. It took me a minute to recognize it. Fake vanilla. Mom used to buy those cheap air fresheners that clipped onto the vents in her car. They always smelled too strong when they were new. For a few seconds, standing inside that storage unit, I felt 26 again. Then I forced myself to work. I started with the easy boxes. Clothes first. Most of them were ruined anyway. Then, kitchen items. Then, the old hallway lamp. I found a stack of magazines, a bag of shoes, and 3 boxes full of things neither Maya nor I had probably thought about since 2019. The Christmas decorations were near the back. The broken angel was still on top. Underneath that box was something I did not recognize. A small green metal lockbox. It was about the size of a toaster. There was rust around the latch. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember whether I had ever seen it in Mom's apartment. I had not. At least, I did not think I had. There was no key attached. I almost put it aside and kept cleaning, but curiosity got the better of me. Growing up, Mom locked herself out of our house more often than she would ever admit. Maya and I learned how to slide old loyalty cards through the door latch to get inside. I still had a supermarket card in my wallet. After a few tries, the lockbox opened. Inside was a stack of papers tied together with rubber bands. Underneath the papers was an old flip phone, a Nokia. One of those nearly indestructible brick-shaped models with a tiny color screen. The phone was completely dead. I picked up the papers. They were phone bills. At first, I assumed they were old records. Maybe Mom's home phone, maybe a cell phone she owned when Maya and I were teenagers. Then I looked at the first date. December 2019. Mom had died in November. I checked another. March 2020. Then another. 2021, there were bills from every year. 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, and then July 2026. Every month, same account, same telephone number. The account belonged to Helen Voss, my mother's name. The bills were being mailed to P.O. Box 4418. I had never heard of that box. Under the mailing information was a physical address. It belonged to a up store in a strip mall. I knew the place. I drove past it several times a week on my way to work. My mother had apparently been receiving private phone bills there for years, including years after her death. I sat down on an overturned plastic crate. One of the coffees stayed in my hand until it went completely cold. I kept looking through the bills. They were itemized. Most of the calls followed the same pattern. One number. Every Sunday. 7:02 p.m. The calls lasted between 11 and 14 minutes. Then nothing. No calls for the rest of the week. Next Sunday, 7:02 again. There were a few other numbers scattered throughout the bills, but the Sunday number appeared over and over. 341 times. I counted twice. I tried to think of a reasonable explanation. Identity theft was the first thing that came to mind. Someone had used Mom's name after she died. That happened. Maybe the phone account had already existed and someone took it over. Maybe Mom had opened it and Maya missed it when she closed everything else. Maya had been thorough after the funeral, but even she could have missed a prepaid phone connected to a P.O. box nobody knew about. That explanation made sense. I liked that explanation. I decided to keep liking it until I had evidence that something else was happening. I packed the phone and bills into my car. On the drive home, I stopped at a pharmacy and asked whether they sold chargers for old Nokia phones. The employee looked at me like I had asked for a replacement part for a telegraph. Eventually, we found a charger hanging on a pegboard behind the counter. It took about 20 minutes to figure out which one fit. When I got home, I plugged the phone in on my kitchen counter. I did not want to stand there waiting for it to turn on. I went to take a shower instead. When I came back, the battery showed 4%. There was no passcode. The phone opened immediately. I went straight to the call history. The bills had been accurate. Sunday, 7:02. Every week. The number was saved under one contact, just one letter. S, there were almost no text messages. Almost one message remained. It came from a number that was not saved in the contacts. The date was the day of Mom's funeral. I read it once, then again, then several more times. It's done. She went quiet. You're clear until he turns 33. My hands started shaking. I am 33. I turned 33 in March. I did what I think almost anyone would have done. I called Maya, straight to voicemail. I did not leave a message. I had no idea what I could possibly say. Hey, did Mom secretly have another phone that continued receiving bills for 7 years after we buried her? Did you know someone texted her on the day of the funeral saying she was clear until I turned 33? Instead, I ended the call. Then I did something much more stupid. I called the Sunday number from my own phone. It rang twice. Someone answered. A little girl. She sounded maybe 7 or 8 years old. Her voice was cheerful, excited, almost like she had been sitting beside the phone waiting for it to ring. Grandma? I did not say anything. There was a small pause. Grandma, you sound weird. My grip tightened around the phone. Then the girl continued. Mom said you might sound different this time. Are you coming on Friday? I made the picture. Before I could ask anything, I heard movement. A woman said something in the background. The girl protested. Then the phone changed hands. I heard a door close. The woman's voice was lower. Controlled. Is this Nathan? My stomach dropped. Nathan is my name. The way she said it made me feel sick. Not because she sounded threatening, because she sounded familiar with it. Like she had known my name for years. Who is this? She said you'd call the week. The unit closed. I stood completely still in my kitchen. What? Listen to me. There is a green notebook in the lockbox. It's underneath the lining. The lining lifts on the left side. Read the last page before you talk to Maya. I could hear that she was struggling to keep her voice calm. Do you understand me? Before you talk to Maya. My mother is dead. There was a pause. I know what they buried. I forgot how to breathe. Someone spoke in another room on her end. The woman lowered her voice. Nathan, the funeral wasn't hers. Read the last page. And don't come here. Where are you? Do not come here. I mean that. If you try to find this number, I'll change it, and you'll be alone with this. Who is the girl? The call ended. I called back immediately. The number was disconnected. Not voicemail. Not busy. Disconnected, I tried again. Same thing. Then again. Nothing. The lockbox was still sitting in my car. I ran outside, grabbed it, and brought it into the kitchen. I dumped everything onto the table. Bills, rubber bands, the old phone. I used a butter knife to pry at the inner lining. The left side looked completely normal. Then I found one corner that was not fully glued down. I pulled. The lining lifted. There was something underneath. A green spiral notebook. Cheap, thin, exactly like the notebooks sold in school supply packs. I opened it. Mom's handwriting. There was no question. I would recognize it anywhere. Her lowercase r always looked more like a small n. When Maya and I were children, Mom sometimes put notes inside our lunches. Have a good day. Love you. Don't forget your homework. Same handwriting. I almost dropped the notebook. It was not really a diary. Most pages looked like records. Dates, names, short sentences. Some pages contained only lists of people I did not recognize with check marks beside their names. There were numbers, locations, initials, small notes. I wanted to start at the beginning, but the woman on the phone had specifically told me to read the final page first, so I did. There was only one sentence written there. Pencil pressed so hard into the paper that the words had left marks on the sheet underneath. August 28th. This is when they notice you know. I checked the date on my phone. August 25. 3 days. I was still staring at the sentence when the Nokia buzzed on the kitchen counter. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The phone had received a text. Unknown number. No words. Just a photograph. It took me about 2 seconds to understand what I was seeing. My kitchen window. The picture had been taken from outside, from my yard. I could see the refrigerator through the glass. There is a magnet on it from a terrible Mexican restaurant near my house. You could see that in the photograph. You could see the lockbox on the table. You could see the green notebook. And you could see me, standing in my own kitchen, holding it. The timestamp on the image said the photograph had been taken 9 minutes earlier. I went straight to the window. I did not open the blinds completely. I looked through the gap. Nobody was outside. The yard was empty. The motion light had not turned on. That mattered because it is sensitive enough to light up when a raccoon walks near the fence. My fence is 6 feet tall. Someone had been inside my yard, close enough to photograph me. And somehow, the light never noticed them. I am writing this from my bathroom now. The door is locked. The lights are off. I know that is probably pointless, but it makes me feel slightly less exposed. I checked every window before coming in here. I saw nobody. No car parked outside that I did not recognize. No movement in the yard. Nothing. Then Maya texted me. Heard you called. Everything okay? I'm coming over tonight. Don't go anywhere. I read it several times. Maya is in Denver. Or at least she is supposed to be. She flew there for work. She told me she would not be back until Thursday. I have not answered her. Maybe she got an earlier flight. Maybe she changed her plans. Maybe there is a completely normal explanation. But I keep thinking about what the woman told me. Read the last page before you talk to Maya. Before you talk to Maya. I still have not properly read the notebook. I started to. I got through a few pages. Most of it made very little sense without context. There were dates going back years, some from before I was born. Names I had never heard. Several pages had the same names appearing repeatedly, then suddenly stopping. There were references to phone calls, meetings, something called the handoff. I did not understand any of it. Then I found one sentence that made me stop. It was about a third of the way through the notebook. The date was 2 days after Mom's funeral. Mom had written one sentence and underlined it twice. If Nathan finds this before he is 33, I failed. If he finds it after, tell him I am sorry about the other boy. He was already gone. The other boy. I do not know what that means. I do not have a brother. I have never had a brother. It was always Maya and me. Maya is 4 years older. There were no other children. At least, that is what I have believed my whole life. I actually called my father after reading that sentence. Or I tried to. He died in 2022 from a heart attack. I know that. I attended his funeral. But for one stupid second, I opened my contacts and searched for Dad before remembering. That is how badly this is getting into my head. I keep thinking about the little girl. Grandma? She did not sound confused. She sounded certain. She knew who she expected to answer. And when I stayed silent, she did not say, "Who is this?" She said Mom had warned her grandma might sound different this time. Different this time. Not different today. Not sick. Different this time. Then she asked whether I was coming Friday. Friday is August 28th. The date written on the last page. The day Mom wrote that they would notice that I know. The girl said she made a picture. For Grandma. I keep wondering what picture. I keep wondering whether that girl has met my mother. I keep thinking about the woman saying, "I know what they buried." Not I know she's dead. Not I know what happened. I know what they buried. What does that even mean? I was at the funeral. I saw the coffin. I stood beside Maya while people hugged us and told us how sorry they were. I watched the coffin lowered. I remember holding Maya's hand. I remember the cold. I remember thinking that 11 weeks was not enough time to prepare to never hear your mother's voice again. Was Mom inside that coffin? I never saw her after the funeral home took her. Maya handled those arrangements too. That thought has been sitting in my head for about an hour now. I hate it. I do not want to think about Maya that way. She took care of everything because I could not. She protected me. She did all the terrible work that somebody had to do while I walked around feeling like half a person. But then I remember the woman saying I had to read the notebook before speaking to Maya, and now Maya is suddenly coming here. From Denver. Tonight, don't go anywhere. That part bothers me more than anything. Why tell me not to go anywhere? Why not just say she is coming over? I have not answered. She has texted 2 more times. Nathan? Then, please answer me. The Nokia has not received another message. I turned it off. Then I remembered the first text said I was clear until he turns 33. Clear from what? Who was clear? Mom? Whoever was pretending to be Mom? And why did my age matter? I keep going back to the phrase, the other boy. Mom wrote that he was already gone. Gone could mean anything. Dead, missing, taken somewhere. Or maybe I am reading too much into it, because I am scared. But there is another problem. I went back to the notebook just long enough to look for my name. It appears dozens of times. So does Maya's. Most entries are short. Nathan, stable. Nathan, no recall. Nathan, dream episode. Nathan, age 16, still clear. Nathan, questioned photograph. Nathan, Maya corrected. I do not know what any of that means. There are several pages where Mom seems to have tracked things I said as a child. One entry mentions me asking who the boy in the red coat was. I do not remember any boy in a red coat. Another says Nathan asked why there were 3 beds. No follow-up. Another, Maya handled it. I stopped reading there. Maybe I should not have. Maybe I should read everything before she gets here. That is what I am going to do now. I have locked the front door. I pushed a chair under the handle, even though I know that only works in movies. My phone says Maya is typing. Then she stops. Then starts again. No message yet. I keep checking the bathroom window. It is small and high up. I cannot see much of the yard from here, just part of the fence. Nothing has moved. But I keep thinking about the photograph. Whoever took it was close enough to see me holding the notebook. Close enough to know exactly when I opened it. I never heard anyone outside. The motion light never turned on. And if the person taking the photograph wanted to hurt me, they probably could have done it already. That almost makes it worse. Because maybe hurting me is not what they want. Maybe they only wanted me to know that they were there, that they are still watching. Maybe Mom knew this day would come. Maybe she knew the storage unit would eventually be opened. The woman said Mom knew I would call during the week the unit closed. That should be impossible. Storage King only announced the renovation last month. Mom died 7 years ago. Unless she did not. I keep thinking about the Sunday calls. 341 of them. Who called that woman every Sunday at 7:02? Was it Mom? Was somebody using her phone? And why did the little girl recognize the call as Grandma? Maybe the easiest explanation is that Mom had another life, a secret family, a daughter none of us knew about who now has a child of her own. But that does not explain why they buried somebody else. It does not explain the notebook. It does not explain the photo from my yard. And it definitely does not explain why Mom wrote about me turning 30 3 years before it happened. There is something else I did not mention. When I first found the Nokia, I assumed it had been sitting dead in that lockbox for years. But the monthly bills showed calls continuing through July. That means somebody had been using that exact number recently. Maybe not that exact phone. SIM cards can be moved. Numbers can be transferred. I know that. But the call log inside the phone also showed recent calls. The last one was this past Sunday. 7:02 p.m., 2 days before I opened the storage unit. So how did the phone get back inside the locked box? The unit had not been opened in years, at least not by me. I called Storage King before locking myself in the bathroom. I asked whether they kept access records. The guy said the facility uses gate codes, but our unit is in one of the older buildings without individual door sensors. He could see when our account code was used at the front gate. I asked him to check. There were entries, not many, one every few months, always Sundays, always between 6 and 8 in the evening. I have never gone there on a Sunday. I asked whose code was used. He said there is only one code on the account. Ours, the same code Maya and I have had since 2019. I asked Maya once whether she visited the unit. She told me no, not since the week after Mom died. Maybe she lied. I do not know anymore. I hate writing that. Maya is my sister. She is the person I call when something goes wrong. She is the one who knows where the spare key to my apartment is. I just remembered that while typing this. Maya has a spare key. The chair under the front door handle will not matter if she uses it. I could leave. But her message specifically says not to. The notebook warning says August 28 is when they notice you know. Maybe leaving would make things worse. Maybe staying is exactly what they want. I do not know who they are. I do not even know if my mother is dead anymore. There is one thing I do know. I am going to read the rest of the notebook. Every page. I am going to start from the beginning. I want to know who the other boy was. I want to know what Maya corrected. I want to know why my mother spent years tracking whether I remembered things. I want to know who that little girl is and why she thinks my mother is her grandmother. I want to know what happens on Friday. Most of all, I want to know why Mom believed 33 was the age when all of this would start. Maya just sent another message. I'm almost there. She is supposed to be in Denver. I checked her location. We share it through our phones. Usually hers shows up without any problem. Right now it says, location unavailable. I heard a car slow down outside about 30 seconds ago. It did not pull into my driveway. I think it stopped somewhere nearby. I have not looked. I am going to read the notebook now. If I find anything important, I will post again. If I do not post again, it is not because I changed my mind. It is not because I decided this was nothing. And it is definitely not because I did not want to tell anyone what happened. Someone has known for years that I would find this notebook today. Someone photographed me through my own kitchen window 9 minutes after I opened it. A woman I have never met knew my name before I introduced myself. A little girl called me Grandma. My dead mother apparently made phone calls every Sunday for almost 7 years. My sister is suddenly on her way to my house from a city 2,000 miles away. And somewhere inside that green notebook is the story of a boy I have no memory of ever knowing. A boy my mother said was already gone. A boy who, according to her, had something to do with me. I just heard someone unlock my front door. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.